A Navy SEAL? Ma'am, with all due respect to your son's imagination, women aren't eligible for the SEAL teams. Perhaps you were a clerk? Or in logistics? It's a noble service, but let's not get carried away with these little fantasies. The crowd of parents and students in the stuffy auditorium of the Naval Base Coronado Youth Outreach Program chuckled nervously. The man speaking, Captain Davies, a man whose crisp, starched uniform seemed to wear him rather than the other way around, smiled a condescending, polished smile. He stood over the boy, Leo Morgan, a lanky 15-year-old who now looked as if he wanted the polished linoleum floor to swallow him whole. Leo's presentation on his hero, his mother, had just been publicly dismantled. The boy stared at his worn sneakers, his face burning with a shame that felt hot enough to melt steel. But across town, in a quiet suburban home, a woman was cleaning a rifle, her movements economical and precise, her focus absolute. She didn't hear the captain's words, but a mother's intuition is a powerful thing, a signal that cuts through noise and distance. A faint vibration, a disturbance in the force of her world, was just beginning to register. And when the Admiral himself saw the photo on the projector screen behind the boy, a faded, grainy image of a figure in desert camouflage, their face obscured by gear, but their posture unmistakable, his blood ran cold. He knew that posture. He knew the rifle she held. And he knew Captain Davies had just made the single greatest mistake of his career. If you believe that true strength doesn't need to announce itself, type quiet professional in the comments below. The auditorium air was thick with the scent of institutional floor wax and the faint, lingering smell of teenage anxiety. Banners proclaiming naval virtues, honor, courage, commitment, hung from the walls, their bright colors a stark contrast to the beige monotony of the room. Captain Davies thrived in this environment. It was a kingdom of his own making, a place where his rank gave him dominion over nervous teenagers and their deferential parents. He was the gatekeeper of reality, the arbiter of what was and was not plausible within the world of the United States Navy. To him, Leo Morgan's presentation was an affront, a flight of fancy that needed to be grounded for the boy's own good. "You see, son," Davies continued, his voice dripping with paternalistic condescension, "the SEAL teams are the tip of the spear. It's a very specific, very demanding, and historically a male-only environment. Your mother's service is commendable, I'm sure, but claiming she was a SEAL, it's like a boy claiming his father was a Valkyrie. It's a category error." He gestured magnanimously, as if forgiving the boy for his fantastic lie. Leo didn't look up. He felt the weight of every eye in the room, the sting of the stifled laughter. He had been so proud. His mother, Sarah, was a quiet woman. She worked from home as a security consultant, a vague term that satisfied most neighbors. She never spoke of her past, but there were clues. The way she moved, with a fluid economy that seemed to glide rather than walk. The way her eyes would scan a room, assessing exits and potential threats in a fraction of a second. The scars on her hands, fine white lines that spoke of a life far removed from suburban cul-de-sacs. And the rifle, the M210 enhanced sniper rifle, she kept meticulously clean in a locked case in her study. He had asked about it once. "It was a gift," she had said, her voice soft but final. "From people I respected." He had put the pieces together from whispers, from old photographs he found in a dusty box, from a single, gleaming trident he'd once seen on a forgotten uniform in the back of her closet. He knew. He didn't have all the details, but he knew the core of it was true. And now, this man in the perfect uniform was calling him a liar, and by extension, calling his quiet, unassuming mother a fraud. The injustice of it was a physical weight pressing the air from his lungs. The other students, caught between pity and the contagious nature of ridicule, shifted in their seats. A few parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one dared to challenge a Navy captain. The silence that followed Davies' pronouncement was absolute, a vacuum where Leo's pride used to be. The boy's shoulders slumped, a silent surrender. The captain, satisfied with his work, gave a final dismissive pat on Leo's shoulder, a gesture of dominance disguised as comfort. He had restored order. He had defended the sanctity of the institution. He had, in his mind, done the right thing. The first sign of the coming storm was not a sound, but a feeling. A low, resonant vibration that traveled through the concrete foundation of the auditorium, a hum so deep it was felt in the bones before it was heard in the ears. Heads turned, puzzled. Captain Davies, mid-sentence as he began to introduce the next student, paused, annoyed by the interruption. Then came the sound, a rhythmic, percussive beat that grew steadily in volume. Thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of heavy rotor blades, many of them, chopping through the air in perfect, disciplined synchrony. The sound grew from a distant murmur to a building roar that rattled the windows in their frames. Outside, the sky darkened as a flight of MH-60 Black Hawks, sleek and menacing, descended upon the parade ground adjacent to the building, their movements not like helicopters landing, but like predators alighting. They didn't circle. They simply arrived, their precision and speed speaking of a skill level far beyond standard military transport. Inside the auditorium, the noise was deafening. Davies's face, once a mask of smug authority, was now a canvas of confusion and irritation. "What in the world is going on?" he barked to a junior officer near the door, who could only shrug in bewildered ignorance. Just as the roar of the helicopters began to subside, replaced by the whine of turbines powering down, a new sound emerged, closer this time. It was the synchronized crunch of gravel under the soles of 100 pairs of combat boots, a sound of immense, disciplined weight moving as one. A sharp, authoritative knock echoed from the double doors at the back of the auditorium. It wasn't a request for entry. It was an announcement of arrival. Before anyone could react, the doors swung inward, pushed open not with a casual hand, but with a firm, deliberate motion. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright California sun, was a woman. She was of average height, dressed in simple blue jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. She carried no weapon, wore no uniform, displayed no rank. It was Sarah Morgan. She didn't storm in. She didn't shout. Her expression was utterly calm, a sea of tranquility that seemed to absorb the tension in the room. Her eyes, a piercing shade of blue, scanned the space, passed over the stunned faces, and settled on her son. In that single glance, she conveyed a universe of reassurance. Her presence was a paradox. She was the quietest thing in the room, yet she was also the center of its gravity. Everything and everyone seemed to orbit her sudden, silent appearance. Behind her, the silhouette was filled by a man whose presence immediately changed the atmospheric pressure in the room. He was tall, lean, with silver hair cut high and tight. The 4 stars on his collar glittered in the light, each one a testament to a lifetime of command. It was Admiral Thornton, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. Every uniformed person in the auditorium, from the junior officer at the door to Captain Davies on the stage, snapped to a rigid, reflexive position of attention. The sound of their heels clicking together was like a string of firecrackers. Davies's face went from confused to utterly pale, the blood draining from it as if a plug had been pulled. His mind raced, trying to comprehend the impossible scene unfolding before him. Why was the highest-ranking SEAL in the world here? And why was he standing behind a civilian woman as if he were her subordinate? And then, the true demonstration of power began. Through the doors, behind the Admiral, a river of men began to flow into the auditorium. They moved in 2 perfect columns, fanning out along the side walls with a terrifying, silent efficiency. They were all dressed in sterile tan combat fatigues, their faces set in expressions of grim neutrality. On the left breast of each man's uniform was the small, golden pin that was the most revered and hard-won qualification in the entire U.S. military. The Special Warfare insignia, the SEAL Trident. 100 of them. They were operators from every active SEAL team on the West Coast. Men had been pulled from training exercises for mission prep from their rare moments of downtime. They filled the room, not with noise, but with an overwhelming, palpable presence. It was the collective weight of thousands of hours of brutal training, hundreds of combat deployments, and an unbreakable, unspoken brotherhood. They did not look at Captain Davies. They did not look at the stunned parents or the wide-eyed children. Their focus was entirely on the unassuming woman in the gray t-shirt. Sarah Morgan walked down the center aisle, her steps measured and unhurried. The sea of operators stood as silent sentinels, their gaze tracking her progress. She walked past the rows of frozen onlookers, her focus solely on the boy with the slumped shoulders on the stage. She didn't acknowledge the captain, didn't even glance at the four-star Admiral behind her. Her world, in that moment, had contracted to a single point: her son. She reached the stage, mounted the 2 short steps, and walked directly to Leo. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. He looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief, relief, and awe. "It's okay, Leo," she said, her voice soft, meant only for him. "I'm here." It was the simplest of phrases, yet in the context of the 100 silent warriors and the 4-star Admiral standing witness, it was the most powerful statement the room had ever heard. The quiet professional had made her point without raising her voice. Her skill was not in marksmanship or demolitions, not in this moment. It was in the currency of respect, a currency she had earned in blood and sacrifice, and which she had just spent to rescue her son. Captain Davies stood frozen, a statue of shattered arrogance, his world and his assumptions completely and irrevocably destroyed. Admiral Thornton moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a man accustomed to absolute authority. He walked to the edge of the stage, his eyes, cold and hard as chipped granite, fixed on Captain Davies. The air crackled with a tension so thick it felt like a physical force. The 100 SEALs remained perfectly still, their collective silence a far more damning judgment than any shout could ever be. The Admiral's voice, when it came, was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "Captain Davies," he began, the title sounding less like a rank and more like an accusation. "I was in the back of the room, preparing to give a few words to these fine young people, and I had the distinct displeasure of hearing your lecture on the operational realities of naval special warfare." Davies swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He tried to speak, to form an excuse, but his throat was a desert. "Sir, I didn't know," he stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. The Admiral held up a single hand, and Davies fell silent as if his vocal cords had been severed. "You don't know many things, Captain," Thornton said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more menacing. "You don't know what it's like to be wet, cold, and miserable for days on end. You don't know the feeling of sand in every part of your body, the taste of fear in your mouth, or the weight of a brother's life in your hands. You know regulations. You know supply chains. You know how to keep a uniform starched. But you know nothing of the heart of a warrior." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. He then turned his gaze slightly, looking towards Sarah, who was still standing with her hand on her son's shoulder, a silent pillar of strength. "You mentioned Valkyries, Captain," the Admiral said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "It's a fitting, if ignorant, metaphor. In the early days of the global war on terror, certain unique skill sets were required for missions of an exceptionally sensitive nature. We needed operators who could go where no one else could, who could blend in, who could be ghosts. The program was classified above top secret. It had no official name, but the men who were saved by it, the men whose lives were pulled from the fire by its operators, they gave a name. They called it Project Valkyrie." The Admiral's eyes swept across the faces of the SEALs lining the walls. "Many of the men standing in this room today are alive because of that program. They are alive because of one specific operator, the most effective, most decorated, and most legendary ghost the program ever produced. Her call sign was Valkyrie 1-inch. The Admiral turned back to Captain Davies, whose face was now the color of ash. The pieces were clicking into place for him, each one a hammer blow to his ego. The room remained in a state of suspended animation, every person holding their breath. "Let me officially update your knowledge base, Captain," Admiral Thornton continued, his voice resonating with the weight of historical record. He pulled a small tablet from a pocket inside his jacket, his movements crisp and efficient. He swiped the screen, and the light from it illuminated the grim set of his jaw. Let's review the service record of Master Chief Petty Officer Sarah Morgan. The rank itself hit Davies like a physical blow. A Master Chief, the highest enlisted rank, a figure of near-mythical authority and experience. Unit designation: Naval Special Warfare Development Group. The Admiral read, his voice clear and steady. For your edification, Captain, that is the unit you civilians know as SEAL Team 6. Not just a member, a plank owner. She helped build their specialized intelligence and reconnaissance troop from the ground up. He looked up from the tablet, his eyes locking with Davies's. Combat deployments, 18, totaling over 5,000 combat hours. That's more time outside the wire than your entire command staff has spent in the field. Combined, he swiped the screen again. Awards and commendations. Let's see. A Navy Cross, 2 of them, in fact. 5 Silver Stars. 7 Bronze Stars with V for Valor. A Purple Heart, 3 of them. A Presidential Unit Citation for actions you will never be clear to read about. Each medal named was another nail in the coffin of Davies's career. The air was thick with the sheer, unbelievable weight of her accomplishments. Mission classification: Tier 1 Special Operations. Her entire file is sealed under national security protocols. The only reason I can even speak of it is because she is technically retired from active duty, and because you, Captain, in your infinite arrogance, chose to publicly question the honor of a national hero in front of her son. The Admiral put the tablet away. The final act was yet to come. He took one step forward, planting himself directly in front of Sarah Morgan. He looked at her not as an admiral to a civilian, but as one warrior to another. Then, with a motion that was sharp, precise, and filled with a reverence that stunned the entire room, Admiral Thornton, the 4-star commander of the most elite fighting force in the world, rendered a slow, perfect salute to the quiet woman in the gray t-shirt. As one, a sound like a single thunderclap echoed through the auditorium as 100 SEALs, the deadliest warriors on the planet, snapped their hands to their brows, their bodies rigid, their eyes filled with a fierce, unwavering respect for the woman who was more than a legend to them. She was their sister. She was their savior. She was Valkyrie One. Sarah simply gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, acknowledging the gesture, her gaze never leaving her son's face. The immediate aftermath was a tableau of profound, echoing silence. The salute held for a long, pregnant moment, an image of institutional reverence seared into the memory of everyone present. Admiral Thornton slowly lowered his hand, followed a beat later by the 100 operators. The spell was broken. Captain Davies, a man completely and utterly undone, seemed to shrink inside his pristine uniform. He opened his mouth, a dry, croaking sound emerging. "Master Chief, I apologize. I had no idea." His words trailed off, utterly inadequate, dissolving into the heavy air. Sarah Morgan finally turned her head, her calm blue eyes meeting his for the first time. She offered no anger, no recrimination, no satisfaction. There was only a quiet, profound disappointment in her gaze that was more cutting than any verbal rebuke. She said nothing. She simply turned back to her son, squeezed his shoulder gently, and guided him off the stage. As they walked back up the aisle, the 2 columns of SEALs parted for them like the Red Sea, creating a corridor of silent, unyielding respect. The operators' eyes followed her, but their faces remained impassive, professional. They were not there to intimidate. They were there to bear witness, to affirm a truth that Davies had dared to deny. The truth of who she was. Once Sarah and Leo had cleared the doors, Admiral Thornton gave a curt, almost invisible nod. The 100 warriors turned in perfect unison and filed out of the auditorium with the same terrifying efficiency with which they had entered. Their exit was as silent as their entrance, leaving behind only the faint scent of gun oil and the immense vacuum of their absence. The Admiral was the last to leave. He paused at the door and turned to face the room, his gaze once again falling on the broken captain. "Your career as a commanding officer is over, Davies," he stated, not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. "You will be reassigned to a desk in the Aleutian Islands. You will spend the rest of your service pushing papers and contemplating the difference between a uniform and a warrior." Dismissed with that, he was gone. The doors swung shut, leaving Captain Davies alone on the stage in a room full of people who now looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. The story of that day, of the captain's lesson, as it came to be known, spread through the naval base and then through the entire special operations community like wildfire. It was told in hushed tones in barracks, recounted with grim satisfaction in chow halls, and typed out on encrypted networks connecting operators across the globe. The legend of Sarah Morgan, already whispered in the most elite circles, was now cemented into institutional folklore. She wasn't just Valkyrie 1, the ghost of classified battlefields. She was now Sarah Morgan, the mother who had summoned a legion of angels to defend her son's honor. The tale became a teaching point, a parable for young officers about the dangers of assumption and the true nature of strength. The phrase, "Don't pull a Davies," entered the lexicon at Coronado, a shorthand warning against judging a book by its cover. Captain Davies himself vanished from the social and professional landscape of the Navy. He took his reassignment to Adak, Alaska, without protest. The man who arrived there was not the same one who had left Coronado. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a permanent haunted humility. He did his work diligently, speaking only when spoken to, his eyes always downcast. He had learned his lesson in the most public and brutal way imaginable, a lesson forged in the silent gaze of 100 of the world's most dangerous men. Sarah Morgan, for her part, returned to her quiet life. She was as she had always been, just Leo's mom. She attended his soccer games, helped him with his homework, and listened to him talk about his day. The events in the auditorium were never spoken of between them again. They didn't need to be. The unspoken understanding that passed between them was stronger than any words. Leo had always been proud of his mother. Now, he understood the true depth of that pride. He carried himself differently, with a new, quiet confidence. He no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. He knew the truth of his legacy, and that was enough. Occasionally, a young sailor, new to the base, would see Sarah in a grocery store or a local coffee shop. They would see a normal, middle-aged woman and think nothing of it. But an older master chief or a seasoned officer might catch her eye, and a subtle nod of profound respect would be exchanged. A silent acknowledgement of the truth that paraded uniforms and loud proclamations were for the insecure. True competence, true lethality, and true honor were quiet. They moved with methodical purpose. They did not need to be seen. They only needed to be known by those who mattered. The rifle in her study remained clean, its polished steel a testament to a life of precision and purpose, a symbol of a legacy not of war, but of the quiet, unwavering protection of what she loved most. Months turned into a year, and the ripples from that day continued to expand, subtly changing the culture of the base. The youth outreach program was revamped. Admiral Thornton himself made it a point to personally oversee its curriculum, ensuring that the stories of service highlighted were diverse and often focused on the unsung heroes. The logisticians, the intelligence analysts, the medics, and yes, the quiet professionals from classified units whose stories could only be told in broad, respectful strokes. The auditorium where the event took place became something of an unofficial landmark. A small, anonymously placed brass plaque appeared one day on the wall near the stage. It bore no official markings, just a simple etching of a Valkyrie's wing and a single date. Everyone knew what it meant. It was a reminder that the most formidable warriors are often the ones you never see coming. New recruits being shown around the base were always told the story by their instructors, the details embellished with each retelling until it took on the quality of a modern myth. It was a lesson in humility, a warning against the arrogance of assumption, and an inspirational tale about the ferocity of a mother's love. Leo Morgan graduated from high school with honors. He didn't follow his mother into the secretive world of special operations. Instead, he chose a different path of service, enrolling in the Naval Academy to become a doctor. He wanted to heal, not to fight. But he carried his mother's lessons with him. The importance of discipline, the value of quiet competence, and the understanding that a person's worth is measured by their actions, not their boasts. He learned that true strength was not about overpowering others, but about having the composure and skill to make a difference when it mattered most. Sarah watched him go, her heart filled with a quiet pride that was as deep and vast as the ocean. Her war was over, but his was just beginning, a war against injury, disease, and despair. And she knew he was armed with the best weapon she could have ever given him, a character forged in the crucible of her example. Her legacy wasn't in the medals locked away in a safe or the classified mission reports gathering dust in a secure vault. Her true legacy was in the son she had raised, in the humbled captain now serving quietly in the frozen north, and in the story that now echoed through the halls of the institution she had served so faithfully. It was a legacy of quiet strength, a testament to the enduring power of demonstrated competence. Years later, an old and retired Admiral Thornton would sometimes visit the academy to speak to the midshipmen. He would tell them about leadership, about strategy, about the changing face of modern warfare. But he always ended his speech with the same story. He wouldn't use names or specific locations, but he would tell them about a quiet, unassuming operator who was the fiercest warrior he had ever known. He would tell them about a young boy's pride, an arrogant officer's folly, and a demonstration of respect that brought 100 of the world's most elite soldiers to a standstill. Remember this, he would tell the sea of young, eager faces. The loudest voice in a room is often the weakest. True strength, true leadership, does not need to announce itself. It is proven in action. It is measured in the respect of your peers. It is found in the quiet professional who gets the job done while others are busy talking about it. Your career will be defined not by the noise you make, but by the impact you have. Be the impact, not the noise. In a quiet home in San Diego, Sarah Morgan would sometimes take out the old M210, not to reminisce about war, but to feel the familiar weight of it in her hands, a reminder of the discipline and focus that had defined her life. The rifle was a symbol, not of violence, but of a solemn promise, a promise to stand between the darkness and the light, to protect the innocent, and to be the silent, steady hand that ensures the sun will rise again. Her work had spoken for itself. In the silent mountains of Afghanistan, the dusty streets of Iraq, and in a beige auditorium on a sunny California day. The truest legacy isn't what you say about yourself, it's what others whisper about you when you've left the room. It's the standard you set, the example that endures, and a lesson that continues to be taught long after you're gone. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where a person's actions define their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.